I'd like to share some information with you that is vital to your future. It can change the way you think and the way you practice. A lot of professionals today feel like their practice is limited by the economics or the area they practice in. For example, I've spoken with professionals that practice in very small cities in the Midwest. They feel like the economics of the area is limiting their growth. People don't have the money, and there just aren't that many people in the county they're in. Professionals in Manhattan and other big cities feel like they're limited by the busy lifestyle of their clients, who just don't seem to have time to stop in at the right times. How do they get themselves known amongst the mass of that many people? People in Florida that practice feel like the older folks that come there only in the wintertime give them a market that comes and goes, which thus makes it hard to have consistency of productivity. And on the flip side, the practice owners up north, when the older folks leave the north and go to the south, feel the same way. Everywhere you go, you'll find unique circumstances for every professional that is out there trying to make a good living in private practice. But the real truth is, none of these economic or geographic factors are really the reason that limits a practice. None of them are anything that a practice owner can control. What we've found is that every practice owner has a way to expand their practice. In fact, there's almost a natural law here that monitors how well you do, and it's simply this. You'll find that your practice cannot and will not expand beyond the point of your own personal management skills. In other words, for every factor that you would find giving your practice a limitation, there is something you can do about it inside your own office. Knowing what to do and how to do it, and having some confidence in that area, gives you the solutions you need to change and have growth and have the profitability you're looking for. Every practice operates on 6 basic systems. We've taken those 6 systems and figured out exactly what are the functions necessary in a professional practice to make it run smoothly, productively, and profitably. I'm going to take you on a tour of these systems and show you why you need to know exactly what each one of these systems does, and why not knowing how these systems operate can cause you all the problems you are currently experiencing. The first system I'd like to talk to you about is the personnel system. This system is responsible for screening applicants that come in to work for you. This includes hiring people correctly, giving those people a job description, and making sure they understand exactly what role they play in your office. This system is also responsible for making sure when they are on the job that they operate efficiently. It also includes monitoring that efficiency in some kind of objective way to see that they actually perform the functions you want. In addition, this system is responsible for getting them to operate with the rest of your staff as an entire team. This is no light thing to talk about because it's probably one of the most difficult things to do. Without knowing exactly how to do every one of these skills, you'll find difficulty in your personnel area. The first thing of importance with hiring personnel is screening. It may seem difficult when you put out an ad and have applicants come in to figure out exactly how to choose these people. Many of them have glowing references in their resumes. A lot of them will tell you everything you want to hear about their prior job history, how much they love to work, how much they've been looking forward to getting an opportunity in a practice just like yours. Then 3 weeks later, after you've hired them, you find that the person you're talking to is not the same person at all that you spoke with when you were screening them. So understanding exactly what indexes, indicators, and testing to use to make that decision is very key in the beginning. You'll create a lot of your own problems when the hiring and screening process isn't done right. After you know how to pick the right personnel, the next thing you need to be able to do is hire correctly. Learn how to have the right agreements in place with people so you don't have headaches and feel tied up. Just because you've made a decision to try them out doesn't mean that you now are obligated to keep them. That means having good office policies so they understand exactly what you expect of them. having a proper probationary period and exact policies about what that probationary period means. It also means giving the person a job description so there's clarity about what you expect of them in terms of the job they're supposed to do. We found many times that people get hired, but after 3 or 4 weeks, they still really don't know exactly what they're supposed to do. An office manager has told them one thing, the doctor has told them another. The other staff told them not to do any of that or to do something else. That much confusion is going to create problems, and the person may not make it on the job. What you need to learn is how to hire very exactly and put a person on a job with a job description and good policy that gives a person very clear delineation on what you expect from them and the rules of the game. That's how you create a team. People who know exactly what's expected of them and also have a description that tells them exactly what to do on the job and how to handle all the problems that may come up on that job. Having an objective way to manage personnel is the only way to really determine whether that new person is someone you want to keep or even whether an employee you've had for a while is still worth keeping. There is a technology called management by statistics to do this. I'll give you a perfect example of how this would work. Let's say you've hired a receptionist, and that receptionist has been on the job for a couple weeks. You need to make a decision on whether you're going to permanently make them a part of your staff, give them bonuses, and perhaps put them in your insurance plan. So how do you make that decision? You would like to have some verifiable evidence that they are actually doing a good job. One of the main jobs a receptionist does for you is to make sure people show up. She or he controls that appointment book, making sure you have an efficient day every day. But if you don't have a statistic or a metric to measure it, how do you really know that's occurring? So I'll give you an example of a statistic you could use here. Let's say you took the number of appointments that the person had on the book at the beginning of the day. Let's say that's 20. By the end of the day, 18 arrive. We do a little bit of math and discover they've got 90% of these people showing up. We take that statistic and plot it on a graph. The next day we do the same thing and plot that on a graph. And we find that it's 86%. The following day it's 84%. We find out that the actual amount of people showing up is on a decline. We find out earlier, if we had statistics, that the person who did the job before had no problem at all getting 97% of your appointments kept. So now you have an objective way to evaluate whether or not to keep this person. That takes the stress off you having to make what would be called an opinionated decision about whether you should actually keep them or not. The other thing this prevents is everybody giving you an opinion that the person is good for the practice. For example, if your patients might come in and they say, "Boy, that new receptionist is great," and the other staff say, "She's really wonderful, we like her," you might like her personally yourself. But that doesn't necessarily make that person the one for the job. Having an objective way to monitor each and every one of your staff would help you make decisions when it comes to a point when you need to give pay raises or perhaps hire another person or give that person a position in your office of greater importance. It doesn't matter whether it's a collections person or an assistant, a tech, a receptionist, or any position in your practice. There is a way to know what the statistics should be, and that's something you need to be trained on how to figure out. Once that is in place, you no longer have a problem determining who to reward or who not to, how to make a decision on whether to keep somebody or not. It takes a lot of stress off of you, and it takes the opinion out of this area. This is called managing by statistics. This is another way to establish morale and teamwork. A staff who knows they're performing to the level that you're happy with can help create a bond with you and with the whole group. It's a much more open system of managing than wondering whether or not your job is on the line or not, or if the doctor's happy with you, or whatever might be the case with a team member. So we want to manage by performance, by something objective. You have to remember that creating a team involves lots of factors. It is not just any one thing. It's running your whole personnel system in a correct manner. This is not something that's new to just healthcare, by the way. It's something that you'll find in many corporations and businesses that are running well. They do some of these actions. You being trained in this will allow you to have a great team of staff you can count on. It will get rid of the double work that goes on in the practice as well. When staff know their job, they're not running around doing things that later have to be done a second and third time, or be cleaned up by another who does know how to do the job right. You probably also noticed oftentimes that staff who weren't trained come to you many times with the problems they have on their own job. They're looking for you to solve it because, frankly, they just don't know how. That's an index that there's not enough description of the job and enough training being given in the office. So I want to emphasize the fact that you find yourself unhappy with your staff. If you're finding that you don't feel they produce enough, you probably don't have a strong personnel system that's really functioning in the manner that it should. And frankly, it's not going to function until you fix this area up. It is the backbone of the entire office. The next system I want to talk about is the treatment plan presentation, better known as the sales system in a general business. Now, you might not think your services need to be sold, but the truth is they do. The reason that is that the public doesn't walk in the door ready to go ahead and accept the treatments you tell them they need. You've had patients and clients that tell you, well, I'd like to put it off. Can we do it next time? I don't have the money right now. And various other reasons they want to give you as to why they can't follow through. Most doctors I run into have the problem of being very direct with the patient or client. They won't just tell the patient or client what it is they need in a way that's certain and direct and with good explanation. They're too worried about being liked and admired. They want to please them and make them feel comfortable. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying it doesn't work. What actually does work is having the ability and skill to know exactly how to handle the objections someone gives you. For example, if a client says to you, well, doc, I don't think I have the money right now. What would you do with that? Most professionals that I've ever met would simply say, okay. The client would then walk out the front door and leave the practice. If you were actually skilled and trained in the area of treatment plan presentation and acceptance, just the basics of what's required to handle an objection like that, then you would handle it. And what you would end up with is a patient or client who is getting the cure they need. It also makes you feel good at night because you've done for that patient what you're trained to do. Now, I'm not saying that you should pressure anybody into anything. I'm not leading you to believe that every patient that walks into your practice will do all the treatments that you prescribe. But 80% of them will, and we know that by statistics. When we train a professional on the exact skills required to present treatment properly and with certainty, and not hem and haw and back off simply because the person doesn't seem to be somebody that's really open toward care, that particular practitioner gets a lot more service delivered. And if you really look at it honestly, that's the key to having a great practice. It's not only expanding through seeing lots more people, it's expanding your practice by doing more treatment that people actually need. That's what the sales system is all about. Until you're trained in this area, you may find that you just have to work a lot harder instead of smarter at getting your practice to grow. We train professionals in this area so that they can work smart and get their clients cared for in a proper way. Another vital system in your practice is called the finance system. The functions inside of this system are pretty simple: collecting of the income, the paying of bills, and the bookkeeping involved. The end result of this is financial stability. You having a cash flow that allows you to put your attention on more important matters like building your practice and handling patients, not to mention a happy and cared for household. If your financial area doesn't run right, you're going to have your attention too riveted on the cash flow situation you currently have. And you're not going to have it on what you really need to do to make more money. This is the area that people typically need training in private practices. I have found very few people that have very exact policy on how a practice should run. Now, the reason I bring up policy is because clients will tend to do whatever they've done in other offices. And if you don't set the guidelines down as to exactly how you want your money dealt with, your billings done, and so forth, then the staff has a tendency to let the clientele do whatever they want to do. I'll give you a perfect example of this. You've probably seen this happen in the last month or two. A patient or client walks up to your front desk and says, "Gee, I didn't bring any money with me today. Can I just get a bill from you guys? Can you send me a bill?" And if the staff doesn't have any policy or guidelines that say not to do that, they'll probably, in wanting to please the person, say, "Okay." So out the door, the person goes. Now, where did that person get the idea that you could send them a bill, that was okay? Probably from another practice they've been in or are currently in, like the medical doctor or somebody else. So you need financial guidelines called policy that tells the staff exactly how you want a matter like that taken care of. That would be the first step. The next step would be to have your staff member trained well enough to be able to comfortably face that person and say, "Well, Mrs. Jones, listen, we don't actually bill, but we do have other forms of payment, and I'll tell you what they are." And she'll get that money collected for you. But you see, that staff member would have to be very comfortable in saying that. And that's a skill that can be learned by the staff, but they have to be trained to do that. When I say trained, I don't mean to simply talk about it at a staff meeting. I mean somebody who sits down with them and actually has them practice all the things they need to learn how to do to face and control the patients and clients comfortably. And also confront any of the insurance companies to get that money in the door. This is a very, very vital area of your practice. What's the use of producing a lot of services if you're not going to collect the money? Your financial stability is what will allow you to go after the next dollars you need to earn. If you're so preoccupied with paying your bills or getting behind or the debt you're servicing, then you're not able to make enough to actually cover it. You're probably going to find a lot of the problems that you face germinate from the finance area right inside your own practice. We recommend firm policy in this area, good training of the staff, and a well-run machine that has very clear guidelines on exactly what is okay and what isn't okay in the financial area. One area you should know that we don't get involved in is the clinical area, the one you are trained in professional school. Now, we don't get involved with that very much because you know what to do to render services. In fact, we're so confident that a professional can render a lot more service than what they currently do that we actually plan out how a professional can actually double and triple their practice. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Under the current conditions and the way you operate, you may feel it's not very likely for you to really increase your production very much. But let me give you this scenario. Let's say I lined up patients outside the front door of your practice, and we found a billionaire who said, "Hey, every person, no matter what they need, I'll pay for it. If it was simply up to you as a doctor to treat them within an 8-hour period that you have with your assistants helping you, and you get as much done as you could, how much could you produce in that 8-hour period?" Well, I'm sure it would be a tremendous amount, and you know that. And why would that be? Because you weren't distracted or having things block the flow, like personnel problems or problems collecting the money or how the bill was going to get taken care of. You wouldn't have trouble with scheduling. You wouldn't have trouble with a lot of the areas I'm talking to you about. You'd be doing exactly what you're trained to do. And believe me, although at the end of the day you might feel slightly tired from all that work, you would be very happy because you were using the skills and capitalizing on all of the skills you got from professional school. That would be an ideal situation. Now you may be listening to this and saying, well, that's not very realistic. I agree. That's an ideal scenario. But let's talk about this. What if you could remove the same distractions, not 100%, but let's say 75% of them, and have a flow coming through the office that arrived in the back ready to see you? The staff operated in such a way that there weren't any blocked flows in the office. They came through, they got there on time, they checked out, the money was collected, and they left. You know as well as I do that you've had mornings when your production has been the unusual high condition that you've been looking for. In other words, at the end of a 3-hour period, you produce 3 times what you produce in a whole day. That's a great day when that occurs, but everybody thinks, well, you can't do that all the time. It's not realistic. The point is, if you can increase the percentage of that a great deal, you have a much different practice and a much higher rate of productivity. That's what we're talking about by getting these other areas in place. Another system needed is called quality control. Quality control has the main job of making sure that everything that's done in the office is superlative service to your clientele. Now, we're not talking about the area of the clinical aspect of the practice. That's because we rarely find that to be a problem. But what we are talking about is all the other parts of the practice. How the staff checks out a patient. How is that patient and client received walking in the door? Are they greeted well? How do the assistants do in dealing with the patients while they're waiting for the doctor to come in and see them? These things are important, as well as how do the staff know their jobs and efficiently perform those jobs in a way that actually makes the day flow. Patients like to come into an office and flow through and get out. When they can do that, plus have a good communication with the staff, it's an incredibly good experience. They'll refer people because they like the practice and can efficiently get in and get out. So quality control's job is to make sure the staff know their job so well that that's exactly the experience that every patient has. Now, I'd like to point something out to you about the training of staff. Most offices in the beginning put some attention on training a new person coming in. But like a professional sports team, you have to consistently be working on training staff if you want a better situation. How can you get a better end result if your staff were at the same level they were a year ago? You just can't. Professional sports teams train whether they win or lose. And the reason they do that is that's part of their quality control. They're going to make sure that they make the mistakes at practice rather than on the playing field. Training your staff on a consistent basis is what keeps their morale up and also keeps them sharp, especially on those skills that maybe they're not so good at. If you leave them untrained, they're going to make the same mistakes over and over again. They'll also end up bringing you problems. How many times have you had it happen where in the middle of a busy day, you have a staff member walk to the back of the office and tell you about a problem that's going on? And it was their job to fix it. Well, here is where we have a staff member who is not trained enough to conquer the problems related to their own job. That's something that quality control would take care of and handle. But you would have to organize that in your practice, put somebody in charge of it, and make sure that that area actually got with staff and made them a better employee for you. Training on an ongoing basis is going to allow them to make more money with you, obviously. It's going to allow them to produce more money for you. That's exactly what a good organization does. And most of all, it's going to make a better team. We've seen office after office where the staff wasn't trained and the frustration built upon the lack of performance of a staff member. That turned into a morale situation and the office fell apart. Why? Because the staff didn't feel like they were doing a great job in the first place. They felt it was okay, but they didn't find too much excitement in that office, simply because they weren't very good at what they were doing. I'll give you another example of why this is important. A lot of times a professional will put in a bonus system or incentive for a job that they want done. Let's say that next week you went to your receptionist and you said, there's a lot of people we don't see on a routine basis, and I'd like you to start calling these people and getting them back in again so that we can make sure they're doing all right. So the receptionist starts making these calls. You might notice in 2 or 3 days that not much occurred. That's a tough job. You're trying to get a hold of people who you haven't spoken to in maybe a year or two, who obviously have already made a loud statement that they don't actually want to come in the office because they're not coming in. So she calls and gets disillusioned. What training does she have to handle the kind of things they say? So she comes back to you and says, well, I talked to some of them and actually they're not wanting to come in. They found another office. She gets rejected. There's another scenario. She'll say, some of them didn't answer. I left voicemails. Some of them said they're doing okay, and they'll come in when they need to. After doing 30 or 40 calls like that, this person is not going to want to stay on the phones too much longer. So let's say you decide to put an incentive here. So you turn to that staff member and you say, Linda, listen, I'll give you $25 for every person you can get to arrive. The person goes back on the phones, being willing to give it a try, and continues to make these calls. What happens here is the staff morale actually gets even lower with this person. And why is that? Well, we have a double loss here. Number one, she couldn't in the first place do a good job getting the result you wanted. And number two, she now lost the income that you put there for her. In other words, it's a carrot she couldn't actually grab. Incentives are good, but they don't solve the problem of having a staff that isn't trained well enough to succeed and do the functions that you really want them to do. A great team consists of people who each, as an individual, are trained to do their job, do it well, and are confident that they can produce the results of that job. You need to create a team by having a staff that is trained and are professional, each one on their own job. That's what quality control is all about. The next system in practice is marketing. It's responsible for getting new clients and patients. It's the promotional area. This area is an important one. Without a brand presence that stands out above the competition and a system to actively get new patients on a continuous basis, you're not going to replace the attrition that occurs each year in a practice. It's estimated that any practice will lose about 20% of its active patient base in any given 1 year. So in order to maintain growth, you have to have more new patients coming in than the active patients that are leaving. Now, we look over a lot of practices every year, and we found a couple of things that are important to know. First off, gimmicks are not the answer to getting new patients and long-term growth. We've never found a professional having trouble getting new patients because she wasn't on primetime TV or because he didn't have huge radio ads or had a hot air balloon floating above the city with his or her name on it. Those types of things, to be honest with you, are not the solutions you need. We find most practices aren't getting enough new patients because they're not performing the marketing actions inside and outside their practice they should be. Now, marketing and getting people to come into your practice is an important area to have some knowledge in, and most professionals don't get any training in this in professional school. Why people stay in your practice and how they get there is important to know. What makes a practice retain patients? Why does somebody decide that you're going to be their doctor? You have to actually come to an understanding of who your target audience is, what causes that group of people to first be attracted to you and then to stay. In other words, we're talking about what it is that the patient wants from a professional practice to make them elect you their doctor. In order to know that, you have to be acquainted with and know how to accurately survey. Surveying is an important first step in marketing because it determines what the wants are of your clientele. What is their pain point? In other words, what problems do they have that you solve for them? At Silkin, we have every client do an accurate survey not only of his or her existing patients, but also in many cases of the target audience in the community who aren't clients or patients yet, to find out what things specific to the geographic location are needed and wanted. Once you know that, you know how to communicate and create want. And creating want is important because if you know what they want, you can offer it and they come in. But without knowing that, it's all guesswork. It's mystery. So surveying is the first thing that we find practices need to do to get some certainty on how to promote properly. Number two, we find a lot of practices do not do something that is very important, and that is outflow. Outflow simply means communication out from the practice. That can be anything from a well-done website, social media post, a video, postcard, an email newsletter, to a phone call. It could be a call to just find out how they're doing after treatment. All of the things that your office does that flows out into the community is called outflow. What comes back is a thing called inflow. That's what you want to receive. That could be money, goodwill, and of course, new patients. Now, the rule about this is very, very simple. It should be obvious to anyone. The more you outflow, the more you tend to inflow. We find a lot of practices, pure and simple, just don't have enough outflow to produce the kind of inflow that they want to have. I'll get into why this is in a minute, but it's important that you understand what the internal measures are that you should take to get new patients into the practice. The best patients that you'll ever get, and you already know this, are referrals. Referrals aren't difficult to get, but there are exact ways to generate them. If you know what the important things are inside the practice that cause referrals, they will be a vital piece of your expansion and prosperity. Referrals are good quality patients. In fact, they're the best because they already know people in the practice and they trust what they've heard already about you. So having an active referral campaign and the way to actually attract people is key. We train every office in exactly how to establish and run a productive referral campaign. The gimmicks are something that always seem to be the thing that professionals want to try. And to be honest with you, they're just not the way to go. Proper marketing will keep the new patients coming into your practice. Knowing exactly how to do each part of the marketing system and having the time to do it is what we train you in. And this includes digital marketing, social media, and building an effective online presence. We teach you to organize that so you actually do marketing in enough volume to keep the growth up in your practice. That's what the marketing system is all about. The next system I'd like to discuss with you is the executive system. Every professional out there in private practice has two major distinct roles that they play. One is a doctor role. That is your duties and responsibilities toward getting treatment delivered. That's completely separate from the second role I want to bring up, which is your executive role. That's the role in running the business, making sure that it's managed correctly and making sure that it runs right. The bottom line, making sure that it's expanding and that it's profitable. The end result of a well-run executive area is a profitable, expanding practice. It is providing for that professional a good retirement. It keeps ahead of inflation and provides time off for that executive as well. These are clearly separate roles. And when they're mixed up or not even recognized, there are all kinds of problems generated. I'll give you an example of exactly what I'm talking about. Staff members need leadership. Most professionals aren't providing the kind of leadership that's needed to get the teamwork they expect out of a staff. Bringing in new ideas, motivating that staff to want to go to continuing education and learn things that are going to make a difference in the practice. Those are leadership skills. That's part of this particular role you play as an executive. Another thing that's important to understand is what an executive actually is. An executive is someone who can get others to get the work done. The executive is someone who creates an environment where people want to work for them. They know how to handle employees in a positive manner that allows them to want to do the job and do it right the first time. They make staff want to acquire a better skill. An executive is somebody that knows how to reward the right people and how to get them motivated to perform better on a daily and weekly basis. Your executive skills are not something that you're born with. You have to learn them just like your doctor skills. If you don't have any time and you find that your practice is giving you problems and staff never seem to be able to do their jobs to the level you expect, this stems from the fact that you as an executive or your office manager as an executive don't have the right training to bring about that type of performance in the staff. At Silkin, we can tell you what the end result of this is after interviewing professionals who have been in practice from anywhere from 14 to 20 years. They end up falling short on their retirement planning. Most professionals today, we've found, are grossly short on setting aside the type of money they need to fund their retirement plan that they're going to have at the day they retire. We find the reason for this is that they simply don't produce enough and don't know how. Inflation rates are eating up some of their profits on a weekly and yearly basis. They find that they are unable to pay their bills in a timely manner. When the practice needs remodeling and new equipment needs to be purchased, they're borrowing for that. They don't have the money set aside. Financial planning is part of your executive hat. You should have the exact way to take the income that comes into your practice, divide it up, and know where to put it to make sure that two things occur. One, the practice has reserves, and it is funding everything it should for you. And 2, the money you spend internal to the practice in a sensible way brings about more return and profit to the practice. That's called good financial planning. There are exact guidelines in financial planning that we train professionals on. People that don't have good financial planning worry a lot about money. We find today that a lot of professionals, in fact, have their attention riveted on inflow. In other words, instead of looking at how to build the practice, they have a lot of attention on the fact that they're not getting certain things out of it, such as making enough money to fund their college funds for their children, for their retirement, or to pay their staff better. These are all things that a person would inflow. The reason that their attention is on this is because they've had problems getting enough outflow to occur and enough productivity inside the practice to actually make the kind of money that they need to. This starts them on a dwindling spiral. It's very simple to observe. The more the person has their attention on the inflow and what they're going to get, the less they're paying attention to the outflow. The less they pay attention to the outflow, the less they have the inflow occurring the way they want to. That puts their attention more on the inflow. That causes them to outflow less, and so on and so forth, until they feel that their profession is something that they're not sure is going to take them where they want to go. So they look to outside things for their income, additional businesses, perhaps risky investments that need to have huge returns in order to put them ahead of the game financially speaking. Those are dangerous things to do because they're not a practice owner's area of expertise. We know that professionals can produce income far in excess of their needs if they were freed up and didn't have these other roadblocks in the way. It's the executive system that makes sure all these other areas coordinate and work together. This area gets the staff working as a team to improve productivity and allow you to be able to produce the kind of services you need to make the money that your business goals and retirement goals need. So the executive system is the key area. Being trained to be a good and competent executive is not something that professional schools offer. Our greatest concern is professionals will burn out and get to the point mentally where they're no longer willing to try. We see a lot of that. You don't have to be burned out, and you don't need to have stress, and you don't need to be frustrated. You simply need to learn how to be an effective executive who can get others to get the work done. You need to learn how to train your staff so they're able to do the exact things you want them to do. Teach them to have pride, morale, and teamwork in getting it done. Then you can have profit and expansion so that the future is something you look forward to going into. There is absolutely no reason you can't produce in excess of what your needs are, both on a personal and on a professional level. You are probably well aware that when you're burned out, no one else is going to have enthusiasm and make the practice run better. You're the leader. You're the person they look to for the enthusiasm and the goals. So when a person burns out, they really aren't causing the practice to go any better. They're just sort of waiting for something else to change it. And you know that you are the one that needs to change it, to make it go the way it should go. To summarize, all these areas of a practice have to be running simultaneously and be operating efficiently. The areas we're talking about, the personnel system, this is the area that is responsible for finding and bringing on board the right kind of staff who are productive, have a way to monitor them, and having good policy and having good job descriptions. At Silkin, we have over 400 pages of job descriptions and manuals that show you exactly what your staff should be doing. Then there is sales. This is the area that makes sure that people understand exactly what treatment they should be doing and talks to them about why they should do it. This area should be able to do this in an efficient and effective manner. Then there is the financial system of the practice. This area makes sure that the money gets collected once services are rendered. Without that, you don't have the cash flow and the financial stability you should. The medical area is the treatment area, the one you've already trained in, as we've mentioned earlier. Next is quality control. It makes sure that the staff are trained, and also that the client leaves the practice completely happy with the service and willing to refer other people. Next is the new patient or promotion division, your marketing. This makes sure that you have enough new patients to replace any attrition that you have from your active client base. We're here to make sure that your whole practice runs right. That's accomplished by getting you to become a competent manager/executive. That's the executive system. By knowing how to get others to get the work done for you, you won't have to put in enormous amounts of time to build, maintain, or establish a good practice. There is no reason a professional should have to work long hours. You should be able to do it on the normal scheduled hours you want to. But you'll never be able to accomplish that if you don't know how to get others to do the tasks you want them to do. You'll also end up dragging the stress home, wearing all the problems that the practice gives you during the day, if you're not a competent executive. Financially, the practice will never seem to be the solution to your retirement or the college funds you want. So being a good executive is really the bottom line. Can you make your organization be what you want it to be? Or will it decide for you what it will allow you to become? That choice is yours. We can train you and show you how to do it. The only real guarantee of your success, though, is your own personal competency in management. Remember this: your practice will never grow beyond the point of your own personal management skills.
You spent all this time perfecting your craft as a clinician. Have you spent the same amount of time or energy perfecting your craft as a business owner? If you haven't, then sadly, you're not doing yourself justice and you're not really seeing the total profit involved in the efforts that you've put into your education and your training. That's what got me. That's what was something that I had to really look in the mirror and say, listen, if my responsibility is to do dentistry to the best of my ability, and this whole, elephant in the room of business ownership is sitting there staring at me, expecting my attention, and I just continue to ignore it, I'm not doing what I need to do for my patients. And they're not getting the service that they require and that they deserve.
By them being able to teach me and train me in this area, I now actually had training and knew how to run a business. It was no longer a good idea approach. I kind of looked at it after the fact and thought how silly it is to try to be just running a business. It's kind of amazing, I guess, how well we do just through a little bit of common sense and good ideas. We maybe go to a seminar and we get an idea and we implement it, or we hear from a friend, or we read a journal and we get an idea and we implement it. But that's a pretty silly way to try to run a business. There's actually a method to doing it.
There's a lot of heart and care behind it. I feel like they have all the interest in the world for me to succeed. They have a desire for me to obtain my goals, to get my practice where I want it to be. And they see what my ideal scenario or my plan is. They want me to get a break and they want me to be successful, and I feel that. And the direction that's given is always simple and direct, but it's really great to have that guidance.
With working with Silkin as an assistant manager, it has made my job more successful because I'm able to streamline our training process with our manuals and our phase training. So it has been able to help me personally grow and expand with the company.
I would advise to anybody that is running a private practice to absolutely pursue a consultation and at least get a practice analysis of how your practice is running now. You owe it to yourself to see if what you're doing is working and if there's something that they can do to help you.
Take some time and talk with them first and have them do a little bit of an analysis of how you're managing your practice. And after a few hours of discussion, you'll find there are some places that you can improve. And then even at that point, those little places those are nothing compared to the real benefits that can be had when you find the problem spots. Because they're there, you just got to find them.
You know, sometimes, another doctor might ask me, well, what's your payback, or what was your return on investment? And, I've been at this for a lot of years now. I'm fortunate to have implemented this into my practice many, many years ago. This may sound a little ridiculous, but I'm millions of dollars ahead of where I would have been. When you add it up over the years of the additional production that I have been able to do, according to what I was, in comparison to what I did previously, it would add up to several $million.
So some people ask me, why did you use a consultant? Was it really worth spending the money? I think that Silkin was the best investment in me personally and in my team. Without Silkin, I would not be able to train new team members. I would not be able to have as predictable a workday, and also figure out where I am, how my practice is, how my team is doing. And it's really increased communication between each and every team member and with me, and back the other way as well. So I feel like this was one of the best investments I've ever made, and my office has never run better.